I don't believe we have, Senator.
Do you think that's possibly something that you should be taking a look at?
Yes, I think we can certainly take a look at that. Not sure where it would take us, but we're happy to explore.
Okay, thank you. In addition, the federal changes to eligibility rules require a 12-month eligibility, not enough coffee yet this morning, redetermination period, and the gradual phase out of the subsidy if a family is no longer eligible. And that's likely to have an impact on the overall number of child care subsidy slots in the state. And you addressed that a little bit. But how many children currently receive child care subsidies in New York?
So in 2015, there were 207,000 children who received a subsidy at some point throughout the year in New York State.
And have you done an analysis, you just asked about the statutory and regulatory structure that we have, but have you done an analysis through OCFS on the available number of slots in the state and what this federal mandate would mean? Have you quantified that at all?
No. I mean, I think we have a general sense, Senator, that what you articulated in terms of the new federal requirement, the 12-month guaranteed eligibility, and then now what we found out in reviewing the regulations is that a phase out that we thought states would have some flexibility in determining is really now meant by the feds to mean another year of phase out. So for a newly eligible family, that will mean that from the point of eligibility until the end, you're looking at a guaranteed almost 2 years of child care subsidy. And that, that's great. We've talked about, right the cliff and avoiding the cliff. The challenge for us is that in eliminating the cliff for families exiting subsidized care, the Act has created a mountain of a lack of access potentially to new families needing access to subsidy, and that therein lies the challenge.
What would the additional resources be that would be necessary for us to actually maintain the current subsidy slots? Have you done any kind of analysis on that as far as what the cost would be? What would the state have to invest?
I don't, until we know what the federal regulations really say, once the final comment period, I think it's difficult to estimate that fully, Senator.
And when does that end?
The public comment period ends February 22nd,
Okay.
but we don't have a date yet when the final regs will come out, despite the fact that our state plan is due to them in March.
How many counties in New York currently redetermine eligibility on a 12-month basis?
I believe there are around 18 local departments of social services who do.
Okay, so for those counties that don't currently redetermine eligibility on a 12-month basis, is there any estimate of what it will cost them to go into compliance, the ones that don't right now?
I don't have that figure, Senator.
Okay, thank you. I have several follow-up questions, but I'll defer to my colleagues and come back. So, Assemblyman?
Thank you. Assemblyman Hevesy.
Hi, good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm sorry I have to start with you, because to be honest with you, in the governor's budget, he's done some really good things, but not on child care. So let me ask you a question about the federal reauthorization. Why don't you just fund it?
Because I think it's an incredible amount of expense where the administration has chosen the need to prioritize expenses in other important areas, anti-poverty initiatives, other things to also help working poor families in the state.
So the governor's not making this a priority?
I don't think that's fair, Assemblyman. As I said, the governor has sustained an $800 million subsidy allocation.
Which is flat from last year, so you haven't increased it, right?
That's
and the
true.
poverty reduction initiative that you mentioned is a $25 million. We'll get to that later. But you're saying because of all of the other things that the governor is dealing with, he can't come up with the $90 million to protect the kids who currently have subsidies?
I think the executive budget articulates what the administration's best guess at their investment is in the next upcoming fiscal year, Assemblyman.
Right, so you're telling us, so let me phrase it this way. Federal government comes down with new regulations. We all think they're really good ideas. Background checks, inspections, all kinds of good stuff. We should be saying, this is fantastic. But if it's not funded, It's the equivalent of the federal government coming with a big punch about to hit the kids and families in New York State. Now, the state is in a position to step up and take that punch, but the governor is moving out of the way so he can let the children and families and the providers in this state take the hit. Why is that?
The best answer.
You knew this, sorry to cut you off, but you knew this was coming since November 2014.
So, again, I think part of what's a strength for us in New York is the fact that we already do a lot of training. We do background checks. We provide a lot of subsidy to families. And so, unlike other states who are starting...
I'm sorry to cut you off. A lot of subsidies to families. Of the 207,000 kids in New York State who are eligible for subsidies, what percentage of those kids do we currently cover that you say we do a lot of subsidies? Have we reached...
That's the number of children who at some point were receiving a subsidy.
No, that's the number of children who are eligible. What's the number of the kids who are actually being, what percentage of that 207 are actually receiving services? Our estimation is under 20%. So I can't...
The figures I have, Assemblyman, is that in 2015, there were 207,000 children who at some point were the recipients of a subsidy.
Okay. So we now know that with the federal government coming down with this new $90 million request, okay, and that's DOB coming up with the number. Why did you guys come up with $10 million? Can you explain that to me?
I think the $10 million is an attempt to begin to implement the increased inspection requirement of the Act with the resources that the administration has.
Okay, let me go back, and I apologize. The 207, you are absolutely right, but that's 20% of the eligible population. That's why I bring it up. That's my mistake. So let me go back to the 10 million. That's only for inspections, which is only one of the 4 pieces that the feds are coming down with. How'd you get to 10 when DOB asked for, what was it, 34 for that? Why is the governor coming up with only 10? Yeah, 34.5. Why do you guys come up with 10?
I'd have to go back to the work we did with DOB in creating the budget.
Could it be that you're assuming that if you don't do these inspections, a lot of the families who are in legally exempt childcare are just going to go under and stop receiving subsidies? Is that possible? Because if that's the case, that's an outrage. Because what you're doing is pushing these children and families, not only that they're not going to get their subsidies, but they're going to go underground, which is exactly what we don't want them to do. So again, let me come back to my first question. Why aren't we funding this?
Well, Assemblyman, the budget session isn't over yet. So.
Yeah, but your position is, unless you're telling me by Friday, which is where you get your 31-day amendments, you're going to come out with the extra $80 million. Is that what you're telling us?
No, that's not what I'm telling
you. So your position is 10 million when we know the need to be 90, and now the governor's just walking away. Is that correct?
What's in the executive budget right now is what's in the budget from the administration.
Okay, so we will do our best to pick up the slack, but I got to tell you, what has happened here on childcare is nothing short of an outrage. Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome, Assemblyman.
Thank you. Senator Diane Savino. And we've been joined by Senator Tony Avella.
Thank you, Senator Kruger. Good morning, Acting Commissioner Poole. I want to follow up on what Assemblyman Hevesy said, because I've often asked this question, why don't we look at child care as an economic development tool as opposed to social services? And I think that it's part and parcel of keeping women in the workforce, because we know interruptions in child care or the inability to obtain safe, quality, affordable child care or subsidized child care leads to disruptions in a woman's career, and it affects her not just in her present life but in her retirement. So I do think that if we're going to put money into anti-poverty initiatives, that maybe the suggestion is move that money to this initiative so that we can maintain quality, affordable, subsidized child care for as many children as we can. On the 207,000 children, does that include the largest social service district in the state, New York City?
Yes, I believe
it
does.
So I find that amazing that outside, in a state of 19.5 million people, only 207,000 children are eligible for subsidized child care. And that begs a bigger question of what outreach we're doing to families that could potentially be eligible for it. But Senator Carlucci talked a bit about the level of safety that parents can feel with respect to the places that they send their children. And you talked about the state's website. It's true, though, that a few years ago, as a result of legislation that was introduced by Senator Klein and then adopted by the Senate and passed by the Assembly and passed by the governor, the facilities that are licensed by the state of New York are required to post their latest inspection. The city of New York insisted on being carved out of that mandate because they felt at the time that they would be able to handle it on their own. And as you know, daycare centers in New York City are licensed by the Department of Health, not by ACS, and not by your agency. What we have seen in reports and research is there are thousands of daycare centers in New York City that are unlicensed, many of them operating for years. There was that horrible case of a small baby who, on his first day in a daycare center, died because they did not know how to provide CPR, and this daycare center had been operating for 14 years without a license. So we're suggesting potentially a letter grade system, but more importantly, we believe that the state needs to play a bigger role in licensing and certifying that daycare centers operating in the city of New York are safe, that the staff is adequately trained, that they are cleared through these background checks. That's not happening right now. What role do you think the state can play in forcing the city of New York to do these things?
Well, Senator, I think, we have a shared goal of trying to improve safety and those tragedies that you just mentioned, I think are evidence that we should explore how we can strengthen our oversight, so.
Good. I want to shift to the raise the age issue because I understand the governor's executive order was really about complying with the federal directive that you can no longer house 16 and 17-year-olds in an adult prison. So it's really not the implementation of raise the age, it's compliance with that directive. The money that's being allocated for the retrofitting of Hudson Correctional Facility is for that purpose.
Correct.
But assuming we do raise the age, there's a question as to what role OCFS is going to play with some of the children who they're not sentenced to a DOCS facility. So are we talking about pooling these children with the close-to-home facilities, or is it going to be a separate system?
Yeah, it would be a separate system. So if we raise the age according to the governor's executive proposal, newly sentenced 16 and 17-year-olds would continue to start in criminal court. It calls for the creation of a new youth part so that they're specially trained judges through Supreme Court, but they'll start in criminal court. There's no longer the transfer presumption down, to family court as was in, last year's proposal. So the majority of those 16 and 17-year-olds would be processed. The difference is once they are sentenced, they wouldn't go to DOCS or to a local jail for those youth who have very short sentences, but they would come to OCFS. Okay, and we, as part of the governor's executive proposal, would develop a classification tool in partnership with DOCS, with State Commission on Corrections, and with DCJS, and apply that tool based upon the youth's history, their service needs, to determine what's the right level of placement. And one of the additions in the governor's executive proposal is the creation of a separate hybrid enhanced secure facility that could potentially be there for youth with enriched service needs. The vast majority of the other youth, Senator, and the projections is that over time, once we're fully implementing over again, the 16-year-olds would start in 18, the 17-year-olds in 19. We would probably be looking at creating additional capacity of about 700 beds, thereabouts, within OCFS's mostly secure system.
Thank you. My time is up, but I would like a second round because I'd like to talk to you about close to home, where we are in the implementation, and also on child protective services and the effect of the opioid abuse crisis on it. So I'll wait for my second round. Thank you.
Assembly.
Assemblywoman Jaffe.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner. I know that you would agree that providing access to child care significantly contributes to a child's well-being, preparing that child for the future, socially, academically, in many ways, and as well as providing important and successful outcomes for the working parents. This should be a priority in New York State. Unfortunately, we're seeing much too much of disparities that exist to access, regarding access to childcare. And there are a number of issues that I feel are essential to be addressed. I mean, just in terms of funding, we need to significantly increase funding. And some of the issues in terms of the 65%, 69%, we should bring it back to 75%. I think that is absolutely essential. And in terms of the subsidies, too many of our providers are closing down. They're also cutting back on the child care services. I have programs that have very long waiting lists of children and families who are struggling because they are not provided access to child care. It is becoming a very serious situation. I mean, they're lowering the eligibility below 200% of the federal poverty level in many, many cases. Many have actually closed the application process because they do not have the finances to be able to offer the services. And I could go on. There are so many issues that are involved. So are you hearing this from the local districts regarding the administration of the child care subsidies and the finances, the issues that they face?
Thank you for your comments, Assemblywoman. Some districts, yes, we do hear concerns about not having sufficient subsidy dollars, to meet the needs. So yes, we do hear that on occasion.
Because we've been hearing that over and over from the providers as well as the organizations in support of the providers, that it's just becoming a very serious situation in terms of providing access appropriately to children and families throughout the state. There's another issue in terms of the homeless, which is also another major issue in terms of assuring that the families, are we meeting the needs, the child care needs of homeless? Is that something that on the agenda in terms of assuring that there are programs for homeless in our communities?
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent point. And in fact, that is one of the elements of the Federal Child Care Act, is making sure that states take appropriate steps to make sure that families experiencing homelessness do have immediate access to child care services. So our staff are working closely with the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance to assess how we can strengthen our partnership in that area now, regardless of the provisions of the Act. But yes, it's an issue with our homeless families as well.
And with the federal mandate, with all the requirements that the federal mandate has put in place and the lack of funding that is being allocated, clearly the federal government provided nothing, but I really believe that we as a state should at least put forward significant funds to be able to respond to what the providers will be serving, providing the services. They're already struggling with the subsidies and the level of the subsidies. And on top of that comes this mandate. We are going to lose many providers throughout the state. Our families are going to lose the opportunity for child care. They will not be able to work, and this is a serious issue. I consider this an economic development issue. This is about providing families the opportunity to have affordable child care as well as families access to child care so that they can work. It's also about jobs for that are involved with child care. We need to focus on this as a absolute priority in New York State as we move forward. And I hope that is something that you will focus on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Daniel Squadron.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you. So I'm a little confused. Is the state's position, or the executive position that we're in favor of the new federal guidelines, or we're opposed to them and want them not to go into effect?
No, as I said earlier, I think on principle, Senator, the concepts are very good. You know, they move away from, you know, the federal dollars really being primarily a work support to the federal dollars really being more of child development. And it's very hard to argue with those.
So that's good for kids?
Yes.
And if we delay, it means that kids won't see the benefit of that until later. Some kids, because they age out of childcare and go to school, will miss the benefit of that entirely. So, you know, I understand that it's expensive and that certainly federal aid to help with it would be wonderful, but it sounds like we're talking about asking for a delay. Let me ask another question. 207,000 beneficiaries currently of the subsidy. What percentage of eligible is that again? Of those who would be eligible for it?
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head.
I read it's about 22%. Does that sound?
It might be. I don't know, Senator.
Great. Can we have a commitment here that the funding will be there to ensure that there are no cuts in the number of folks who are able to receive subsidies, whatever happens with the federal requirements?
I can't.
Unfortunately, those were not the people testifying.
I can't make that commitment here today, Senator.
So that may well happen here.
I'm sorry?
That may well happen.
I don't know. I don't know yet.
Is it fair to say that the choice before us is either to delay improvements in quality or cut subsidies?
I think that's the dilemma that states are finding themselves in, as I said earlier, in trying to implement this act. So,
Just
yes.
a final question. I mean, that's not an acceptable choice. That does sound like the choice the legislature is being given right now with this budget proposal. That's an enormous problem. Just finally, just so I understand, because this is the other confusing thing, is the contention that $10 million is sufficient for the new regulations, or is the contention that it will be delayed and therefore we only need 10 million, but 90 million is the correct number?
I think it's an initial investment to try and initially comply with that element of the increased inspections.
So we
required by
agree
the Act.
90 million is about the right number. Because if there's debate on that 90 million number, I'd be happy to know that. Is there?
I think it's fair to say, Senator, that it's possible once the new federal regulations are promulgated, it may in fact turn out to mean more than $10 million.
Like 90 million? I mean, is there reason to doubt that number? Yes, no, maybe.
No, there's no reason to doubt it.
Okay, so we'll go with 90 million. So we have an $80 million gap. That's going to be $80 million in cuts to existing subsidies. Let's talk about evidence-based home visiting. I noticed that Healthy Families is proposed at last year's level, and Nurse Family Partnership is proposed at a cut from last year. Are all of our eligible families for evidence-based maternal home visiting, which has an enormous return on investment to the state, has tripartisan support in the Senate, bipartisan support in the Assembly, is there any reason to be reluctant to have the funding to offer that to every eligible family?
So the Nurse Family Partnership is in the Department of Health's budget, Senator.
Right. And Healthy Families. We're talking about evidence-based maternal home visiting, which is very, very much a Office of Children and Family Services issue.
I think we're pleased to see that in our current budget, we're maintaining our $23.3 million to support Healthy Families.
Right. Do you know how many families that serves?
Approximately 6,000 a year.
Do you know how many are eligible every year?
I don't.
About 120,000. It's just confusing that we have programs that are working, that A, we silo them, and B, we maintain a funding stream that excludes 95% of eligible families. I'm just confused about what the policy decision is there. Would you mind explaining?
You know, Senator, the best answer I can give you is that, you know, we have to make a lot of decisions about which programs to fund. You're absolutely right. The Nurse Family Partnership And, healthy families have proven, outcomes, but the truth is there's a lot of other priority needs as well. So, again, it comes back to if we had more money to invest, those are the kinds of programs with proven track records and good returns on investment.
I mean, I would just urge, both when it comes to childcare, where we have a lack of available subsidies for those who are income eligible, a lack of support for middle-class families, and evidence-based maternal home visiting, that we should really put money where we know we're going to need to spend it. $90 million because of new federal regulations, a gap in those who are getting subsidies, and programs for new families that save money and save lives over time. It's just strange that we just do what we've always done instead of trying to improve things. So I would really urge and hope that in the 30-day amendments we see a goal of improvement, not sort of treading water or drowning. Thank you.
Assembly. And also, could we maintain order in the House, please?
Assemblywoman Jaffe? Oh, no, I meant Fahey, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Just a couple of questions, but I just want to start by reiterating that I do share the concern about the, no question, I think there have been a number of questions already, but I do want to share the concern about what I also think is a lack of funding in terms of implementing the new child care regs and given the extraordinary demand out there. One related question to that, however, what would or do you know what the number would be if we brought the child care market rates up to 75%? Do you know what that might cost? I know you did say where it's about 69 or so right now. If we brought it up to the 75th percentile, is there an estimate as to what that might be in funds?
Yeah, Assemblywoman, I don't have that figure with me here. I
Okay.
can certainly follow
I mean,
up.
given the expense and given the needs, obviously it would be another great goal in addition to the needs of the impending regulations. Switching gears, after-school funds. I know there was limited additional funds put in last year. Certainly there was another op-ed this morning from the After School Network, and the number that we keep hearing is that there's a unmet need for about $1 million, 1 million students across the state who are estimated to be not served. Do you have a sense of what the department might be doing now to try to expand within the dollars they have, and if that number is a number you would concur with in terms of the need out there for after school?
I have not read the report that you referenced, Assemblywoman. So we have the Advantage After School at 17 something in our budget. And I believe there's 15,000 youth across the state who are able to benefit from after-school, programs, which is terrific. I think we have 117 contracts across the state. So I think that's in recognition that they're great programs to support, youth and communities. And, we are maintaining that in the proposed executive budget.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to touch base a little bit about the resources for caseworkers, child care workers, throughout the state as it pertains to investigating reports of abuse. As you know, we've had some horrific incidents out in Western New York. They seem to have been cyclical in nature. A lot of the problems and abuses that we're seeing are oftentimes due to generational poverty and substance abuse, mental health issues that are happening. And I believe it's very, very important that our state provide the proper amount of resources for our caseworkers on the front lines. I know you share the same sentiment. I'd like to hear a little bit about what your office has done due to this scourge in many ways across our community in Western New York, as well as the state providing those resources for our caseworkers.
So I would just also make a comment, Senator, that we've seen good progress in Western New York since those tragedies several years ago. And, to the credit of the Erie County Department of Social Services and new leadership there, they've really made a lot of progress in turning things around. We provided, of course, a lot of support to them, a lot of training assistance to support the new caseworkers that they were bringing on board. But I think as a general response, to your question, and thank you for recognizing, we too at the Office of Children and Family Services take very seriously the responsibilities that frontline child protective service workers have across the state. In many ways, they are our first responders to the most horrific, difficult situations that anyone could be expected to walk into. We're doing work with counties now, and we have a work group that we launched at the end of last year, bringing together some of the commissioners and caseworkers to look at our current model of training and coaching and supporting caseworkers. Again, given the, as the Senator mentioned, the trends in heroin and opiate abuse, caseworkers are always walking in, to new situations. So I think we do our best to try and enhance our training so that they're armed with the best tools and skills. And we've also invested a lot of money in recent years in Child Protective Service supervisors, right? Because you can have a great frontline worker, but if there's not good supervision, then unfortunately that's not the kind of support that they need. So we've had, with support from the feds and KC Families programs, an enhanced supervision model that a number of our districts have been taking advantage of to strengthen CPS practice and supervision.